Hello again, everyone. This is Sarah. Good morning, afternoon, and evening to our esteemed audience and speakers. Welcome to another highly anticipated YALDA post AEC reflection webinar entitled Capacitating Young African Entrepreneurs to Build Resilient and Climate Adaptable Businesses, that will feature innovative strategies for young African entrepreneurs to make their own contribution to climate smart adaptations. I am Sarah Shtiwi, and it's a pleasure to moderate today's session. We'll quickly go through the etiquette. So please, everyone, when you enter the roundtable, make sure you are on mute. Remain on mute throughout the roundtable. Please make sure your camera is off. Type your questions or comments in the chat box only. Put your name and country. Those whose questions or comments are selected will be asked to unmute and speak. And lastly, if you're asked to speak, you must introduce yourself by name and country only, please, and then repeat the question or comment you typed in the chat box. So youth is the future of human beings and most crucial force for development. Africa is experiencing a rapid population expansion, and currently over 60% of the whole population is youth. Many African countries' labor markets are feeling pressure to absorb the large youth bulge. Thus, in order to achieve climate-smart development in Africa, it is essential to integrate youth into green finance and maximize their potential in the process of climate-smart adaptation. Climate-smart innovations are not far away from us. When the threat of climate change is propagandized these years, many people are making solid efforts to find climate resilient solutions in various sectors. For example, the Lightsmith Group and Village Capital jointly created an environmental accelerator called ASAP this year, which supports 16 selected innovative technology ideas seeking climate smart adaptations in Asia and Africa. Such ideas are nice models for young African entrepreneurs to use for reference. The special webinar themed Capacitating Young African Entrepreneurs to Build Resilient and Climate Adaptable Businesses will feature innovative strategies for young African entrepreneurs to make their own contribution to climate smart adaptations. The webinar will provide a platform for African youth to get informed about the climate change condition and set up the idea of climate smart sustainable development. So I'm going to introduce today's speakers. Firstly, starting with Noah Owomugisha, the head of Green Growth and Business Development Services, ABI Finance Ltd. Numfundo Zondi, the founder of Icebo Empower Network and the founder of Think Go Skin and Think Go Tea. Next slide, please. Adel Khaled, Waste Management Consultant, Teaching Assistant Faculty of Organic Agriculture, Heliopolis University for Sustainable Development. Mary Helen Ngono Mvodo, the founder of Mary Tastes, an agribusiness, farming, agritourism, and agri-tech expert. Niasha Fidelis Shumbayerwa, carbon projects expert. Anusha Sichern, youth leader and climate professional, Yali Fellow, Yongo member. Isaac Dianaki, circular economy and renewable energy expert, Yali East Africa Fellow for 2020. And finally, Dorcas Kikwai, founder of EcoSafi Africa. Welcome to all of you. Starting with an overall question. directed to all of you. The question is as follows. It is a general belief that Africa contributes very little to climate change due to its carbon emission. However, we can notice that the continent is hugely influenced by the negative impact caused by climate change. Under the background of global pandemic recovery, how should Africa adjust itself to handle the climate change influence and develop in a climate smart way? So you have the question on the slide. I'm going to call on Noah Owamugisha. Please share your thoughts with us about the question. Noah? Numfondu, Zondi, please, if you can share your thoughts.
I don't know if you can hear me.
Can you please show us the slide of the question? So the question is as follows. How should Africa adjust itself to handle the climate change influence and develop in a climate smart way? Just to pick your brain to start.
Yeah, I think the first point in how we can adapt to climate smart agriculture, especially or climate change in this sense, I'll answer from a perspective of agriculture is once we are able to adapt to the climate language for Africans. I think one of the main queries that I get from people who want to understand where we are in terms of climate change is, what does it mean? And I realize that once we change the climate language to suit Africans and to suit where we are as Africans, then we begin to find the way forward. And I think there are so many other factors that go around that, which means that we also look at digitization of Africa in terms of the different sectors that we are in, and especially agriculture, in a point where we are at the moment. I think when we begin to look at digital agriculture and trying to get into the smart digital agriculture, and then begin to answer the questions of how do we then understand where we are in terms of climate change and the way forward when it comes to climate change. I think those are the 2 points that really, really come into mind. Think about how do we, pay forward in terms of climate change and climate smart agriculture.
Thank you for your insights. Next speaker, please, Adel Khaled, would you please share your thoughts with us about the problematic? Noah, are you with us now?
Yes, apologies. I had connection issues. I had to change my network. Yes, but I can hear you well. Are you able to hear me?
Yes, we can hear you perfectly. Would you be able to answer the introduction question for us? Can you please go back to the slide for Noah? Yes.
Okay.
So Noah, the question is, how should Africa adjust itself to handle the climate change influence and develop in a climate smart way? Just to pick your brain, what are your thoughts about this?
Thank you. Of course, as well explained in the background of the question, Africa is not one of the greatest emitters, but we are, as a continent, the most vulnerable to climate change, which means then that our most serious focus. I think we have some feedback. Yes, so which means then our focus has to be on adapting to the changing climate, as well as mitigating the climate change problem so it doesn't get worse. Of course, climate comes with a number of issues, one of them being the biodiversity loss. So again, in addition to adapting to the climate change and mitigating the climate change, we need to be able to conserve biodiversity. I'll concentrate more on talking about what we ought to do. There, and especially the adaptation. Of course, for those who may be quite aware of what happens under adaptation, you're basically trying to deal with cushioning yourself against the effects of climate change, so that whatever business you're doing, you continue to thrive as youth. Make your profits, impact yourself and the society, but as well make sure that what you're doing is climate proof. If you're having a product, you're sure that your operations can continue. Given that in Africa, agribusiness or agriculture is a big deal, and like in the case of Uganda, is the key sector employing most of the youth, it means you must do, if you're looking, for example, at breeds and seed, you must go for those which have been adapted to climate change. If you have some drought or longer periods of sunshine, then you have to look at varieties which mature early. I'm giving examples. If you're looking at, you're in livestock and you know there are periods when rains take long to come, then you can't only consider rain-fed agriculture. You may have to go for dry feeding and hay, dry feeding where you're looking at hay, you're looking at silage, to ensure that you continue with the production. I'm just using an example of the livestock bit. If again, you're in crop production, you have to consider, if rains are short, you have to consider, for example, early maturing varieties. I'm just giving examples of how you can handle the climate change influence and develop in a climate smart way. Once you do that, then you're able to de-risk your enterprise. If you are going to lose your crop, or if you're going to lose your product because the climate is changing, then it means the way you structure your operations will put your business in a place where before the drought comes, you've already harvested. If the rains delay, you have alternative sources or buffers to enable you to continue production. If you have an issue of the rain being erratic, you have your irrigation, which in case the rain doesn't come, you're able to deploy irrigation, and then you can continue to produce. So, and this is not only about agribusiness, it can also be in any other sector. That's what I would highlight as briefly as the way we can handle the climate change influence, but also develop in a climate smart way. So we must be in position to structure our businesses with mitigants, rather with adaptation strategies or interventions or investments which enable us to continue to produce, to continue to sell, to continue to do business, irrespective of how the climate is changing.
Thank you, Noah, for your very insightful examples. We're going to give the floor now to Adel Khalid. Are you with us, Adel? Can you hear us?
Yeah, I hear you very beautiful. Okay.
Do you need us to share the slide of the question with you? It's the same question. Just share your thoughts with us.
Yeah, I understand. It's the same question. So, from many insights, the African continent has to deal with different criteria of climate change, and the climate change impacts towards many aspects like agriculture and a huge amount of extreme weather. Like the double C report discussed with us about how the vulnerability of the Africa to climate change. The contribution of the total African account to 2 to 3% only to the greenhouse gases. However, the continent will deal with and struggle with many obstacles like floods, extreme weather, like coastal inundations, and so on. So business as usual is not an option anymore. We have to deal with many and new technologies related to building new material and highlight the capacity of the adaptation and mitigation with climate change, especially in agriculture. To mention for you one example to save your time, the climate smart agriculture is one of the most prestigious solution to deal with the climate change. However, many of the European countries and Canada, for example, have built a new systems dealing with the vertical farming, in which we have to deal with the agriculture indoor without the need of the light from the sun, and the actual temperature will be all under control. So it's one of the most recent techniques in adaptation and mitigation with the climate change, because we have many overcomes related to the climate change nowadays, especially in Africa, as we all thinking today.
Thank you, Adel, for your answer. We're going to give the floor now to our next speaker, if she is with us. Mary Helen, can you hear us? Mr. Nyasha, can you hear us?
Yes, sure, I can.
So
yeah,
the floor is yours.
Can you hear me clearly?
Yes, the audio is not great, but the floor is yours. Can you share your thoughts with us about the question?
Yeah, I just wanted to say maybe just two things that have already been highlighted by the previous speakers, and which is the importance of, our role as an agricultural continent in solving the climate crisis. And as been mentioned before, that we have an issue with climate change adaptation and mitigation. And I want to keep on coming back to the fact of agriculture as an important sector in achieving this goal, because, it's like a two-edged sword. You can both be able to implement mitigating activities and also adaptation activities at the same time with one sector. So I think agriculture in itself becomes of paramount importance in, getting around the climate crisis in Africa. And we also want to understand positioning as a continent, given how, there's different instruments, policies that have been put into place from COP26 to COP27 that help Africa be an instrumental part in this transition cycle. So one thing that I wanted to make sure that we all recognize is the presence of the African Carbon Markets Initiative that enables, African countries to access finance to be able to implement this adaptation and mitigation activities. So as we go into other questions, I think that's something that I would be willing to discuss and hear what other speakers think about it as an opportunity for Africans to, create jobs and access finance and be able to develop businesses that help in the climate crisis adaptation and mitigation process.
Thank you for these insights. Calling on to our next speaker, Anusha Sechern. Can you hear us?
Yes, I can hear you. Give me a minute. Can you see my video? Yeah, okay. So good afternoon, everyone. I am Anusha Sichan from Mauritius, and I would like to say thank you to YALDA for organizing this session today. Just an apology, there is a pre-cyclonic weather event in Mauritius right now, and the internet connection might not be too good. And also there's torrential rainfall. So if there's any problem for you to hear me, please speak to me and say so. Okay. So as all the previous speakers mentioned, that Africa is an agricultural dominated continent. So I would reply with this question, to this question with a more focus on agriculture. And I also come from an agricultural background, but also I will try to touch a little bit about the other sectors. And I will also reply to the first part of the question, which is about the global pandemic recovery, and then move to the climate smart agricultural adaptation. So the pandemic came at the right time to make us stop and think in order to review our priorities, needs, consumption patterns, and address our strengths and weaknesses at individual, society, country, and continental levels. So consequently, we have reorganized our lifestyles in such a way to keep only what is important and to make judicious use of our resources for the present and preserve it for the future generations. So when we talk about being climate smart, it is just about being smart on how to judiciously use our resources and adapt and deal with the whims of climate. And when we talk about Africa, it is not only about African countries, but also small island developing states such as Mauritius, which form part of the African continent. So as stated in the question, Africa contributes very little to climate change, but is hugely impacted by climate change. And it is low on consumption of carbon. So I think what would be of benefit to us is Africa must secure climate finance from the global north in order to accelerate adaptation actions and building resilience across all sectors. Okay, since agriculture represents a big part of the economic pillar of Africa, and it provides employment for about 2/3 of the continent's working population, it is also a great opportunity to develop entrepreneurship and more employment in this sector. For example, agricultural sector can be digitalized with forecast system using mobile application and sending an SMS to planters about the precipitation patterns, sunshine hours, for them to know when is best to plant and to harvest. So entrepreneurs can venture into this creation of mobile application. And also we can develop a system of mobile money for planters who do not have a payslip to open an account at the bank. Also, agricultural technologies for greenhouse gas, for greenhouse production of crops, irrigation system, drainage and water management, and also for mulching, crop cover, soil fertility management, and climate resilient crop varieties should be developed. Furthermore, we should take care of the animal health and animal feeds while talking about climate smart agriculture. And what would be of good benefit to the African continent would be grants and adapted scheme to ensure setup and running of agricultural businesses, knowledge sharing, technology transfer, capacity building of the African continent, and also derive insurance schemes for growers and farmers during calamities, such as in Mauritius, we have the ACAS, which is a solidarity scheme for farmers whose crops have been devastated by cyclones or any climate events. And we should also have import subsidies. So when we do not have enough food in Africa and we have to import from other countries, we need to have a huge subsidy so that we can still cater for food security in the continent. And we could further develop organic fertilizers such as composting, seaweed. And by doing so, we can employ women and youth as new entrepreneurs. And also increase access to education and literacy rate among women, and give land access ownership to women who can take up farm activities such as growing crops or rearing of animals. Furthermore, we should be thankful that we have a rich biodiversity in Africa. So consumption and conservation of African biodiversity is important as it provides nature-based solutions such as ecosystem services. And for that, we need to protect our indigenous communities and include them in the development, as they have practiced over years how to withstand the effect of climate change, enable livelihood, and conserve natural resources and storage of food. And also we can add a combination of climate, science, education, and policy, and inclusion of women, youth, and all people in all the development for climate smart would be essential for adaptation and resilience building in Africa. So thank you very much.
Thank you for your lovely intervention. We give the floor now to our next speaker. Isaac, are you with us? Isaac Diamwaki, the floor is yours. Isaac, we cannot really hear you very well.
Can you hear me? Hello?
Hello, yes. Yes, we
Hello?
can hear you now, Isaac. Can you hear us?
Let me take out my video.
Yes.
Hello?
Hello, can you hear me? Isaac seems to be having some internet issues, so we will get back to him later. We give the floor now to our speaker, Dorcas Kikwai. Are you with us?
Hello?
Dorcas, hello, yes.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you perfectly. The floor is yours.
All right, thank you very much. Just to go back to the COVID pandemic, as we all know, it led to a great disruption of lives and livelihoods, especially for countries here in Africa, many of which had a very low institutional capacity to deal with a sudden public health crisis and low budgetary capacity to fund pandemic recovery stimulus. But one way of thinking about a recovery from a sudden and multidimensional crisis is to treat it like a bridge and to build resilience for future climate change impact. And in order for us to develop in a climate smart way, Africa will need to take a multifaceted approach that addresses both the immediate impacts of climate change and the long-term challenges of building resilience to future impacts. We've had people talk about climate smart agriculture, so I will add other kinds of points. For example, we can invest in early warning systems. Our continent, Africa, is characterized by extremely low levels of investment in weather and climate observation infrastructure, limited capacities to analyze and interpret existing climate information, and even more limited uptake and use of climate information in policy and decision making. In fact, it's been noted that in Africa, the current observation network is only an eighth of the required minimum density over the continent, and a large portion of the observation infrastructure lies in a state of disrepair. So under these kinds of circumstances, given that even Africa is extremely vulnerable to the effects of say drought, flooding, cyclones, and other climate change-led weather events, it is important and necessary for us to strengthen the capacity of the African meteorological services. These services can enhance the continent's climate resilience, protect lives and livelihoods, and even deliver socioeconomic benefits. For example, farming systems are largely driven by weather patterns, especially rainfall seasons. Accurate and timely prediction and weather forecasting services are therefore important for facilitating decision-making and delivering early warnings for preparedness and sustainability in the agricultural production and in the value chains. Another point I would add is and which is I'm very passionate about, is building capability and capacity. And how can we do this? Is investing in training and education programs to increase the number of professionals with the skills and the knowledge to address climate change. We can also build institutional capacity, which includes setting up of national or regional climate change agencies, and even strengthening the existing ones in order to coordinate and manage implementation of climate change policies and programs. We can also promote research and innovation by strengthening our research institutions in Africa to conduct high quality research to bridge the data and knowledge gap, and also in creating incentives for businesses and entrepreneurs to develop and implement innovative solutions for addressing climate change in Africa. So as a continent, we can develop in a climate smart way. We must take a comprehensive, integrated and large to addressing the challenges posed by climate change. I have just mentioned a few that I believe we can look into. Thank you.
Thank you, Dorcas, for your answer. We're going to move on to, we're checking if Isaac can join us now. Isaac?
Yes, can everyone hear me now?
Yes, much better. Go ahead.
Yep, so responding to the question on the table, I highly believe climate change is with us, and really we would look at having it, like looking at it as an opportunity for us to even advance in terms of being valuable to the communities we come from, especially the youth. So for us to develop in a climate smart way, we have to look at the opportunities Africa has. And the first opportunity is that we have so many youth who can do much. Actually, many people say Africa's powerhouse is the youth. So as youth, how do we come in to address the problem at hand? If I can give examples, we have so many problems coming, resulting from climate change, over which food security is a problem, over which inefficient energy access is a problem, and that is where we can tap into it. So if you look at the Ugandan context, we have so many people doing agriculture, but they lose up to 30% of their harvest because of climate change vagaries. So how do we tap into that? As youth, can we come in with so many innovations to address our challenges at hand? Then again, we would look at economies growing in a greener, growing greener, like the green economies, emphasizing more of green economies. So how can governments support such kinds of green enterprises or green innovations? So if I can give an example, that in Uganda, so many people use biomass-based fuel. So as youth, how can we contribute to reducing deforestation, where many people do a lot of deforestation to cope up with the demand at hand? So if I can give an example of myself, looking at the rate of loss of tree cover in my country, I had to devise a solution or an alternative. And that is where I came up with an enterprise where we are making briquettes recycled from organic waste. So the briquettes are much more, long lasting. And again, you find you're providing an alternative so that people do not go to the forests to cut the trees. Then going into technology, how can we leverage on technology as Africa to see that we can really adapt to the changes in climate? If we can look at in the Ugandan context still, which I think the context of Uganda is more like other sub-Saharan countries. What innovations are in place that can promote early warning systems, that can make people more informed? How can how can people come up with ways of making even those technological innovations much more adoptable? So there are so many aspects that Africa can leverage on, if at all there is so much well-organized pathway where people can get solutions and where alternatives can be provided, and then we grow in a more sustainable way. Thank you.
Thank you, Isaac. We're going to move now to the next section. We're going to give individual questions to our lovely panel of experts today, starting with the first speaker. This question is for Dorcas Kikuai. Are you with us, Dorcas?
Yes, I am.
So the question is the following. A large number of resources have been put into combating COVID-19 pandemic since 2020, which limits the ability to invest into climate smart sectors. How do we balance these two fields? And is it possible for us to achieve both two goals at the same time? The floor is yours.
All right, thank you very much for that question. So as you know, the pandemic has had a significant impact on economies worldwide, and Africa is no exception. Governments have had to scramble to respond to the crisis, and so many have had to redirect resources away from other priorities, including investments in climate smart sectors. However, as we begin to recover from the pandemic, it's important to recognize that addressing the challenges posed by climate change is not only a moral imperative, but also an economic one. In fact, suggestions that we cannot afford to address climate change, biodiversity loss, and economic crisis at the same time presents a rather false choice. Both crises must be addressed at the same time, meaning resources have to be balanced in dealing with these issues. So one way to balance the competing demands of addressing the effects of the pandemic and investing in climate smart sectors is to consider the ways in which these two goals can be mutually reinforcing and prioritize investments that have dual benefits. For example, investing in renewable projects such as wind, solar, hydro can reduce greenhouse gas emissions and promote energy independence while also creating jobs and supporting economic recovery. We can also invest in sustainable transportation, infrastructure such as bike lanes and public transport, which can help reduce greenhouse gases while reducing the need for personal transportation and promoting social distancing. We can even invest in green buildings that are energy efficient and reduce our energy consumption, reduce our costs, while at the same time improving air quality and indoor air ventilation, which can be important, especially in preventing the spread of airborne viruses such as COVID-19. Another way to achieve both goals is to leverage the economic stimulus packages that have been put in place to support pandemic recovery, while also drive investments in climate smart sectors. This could include measures such as funding for clean energy, research and development. We can have incentives for businesses to invest in clean technologies, and even invest in adaptation in agricultural sectors to cope with current and future impacts of climate change. For example, almost half of the workforce in Kenya is employed either in agriculture, which accounts to about 40%, and tourism, which accounts to 8.8%. And together, these activities contribute to over 40% of the GDP, meaning they account highly to both economic growth and job creation. And studies have recommended that if we prioritize programs such as agroforestry, resilient seed, irrigation programs, even reforestation, these investments have the potential to reinvigorate the travel and tourism industry, which was badly hit by the pandemic, and also creates jobs rapidly, while also safeguarding communities against climate change. We can also utilize certain financing mechanisms to invest in climate smart sectors while supporting the recovery from the pandemic. For example, we have the Green Social and Sustainability Bond, which right now is soaring in popularity as governments and corporations aim to build back better post the pandemic. And this can be used to finance environmental and climate-related projects that could spur economic recovery in our continent. Another way is we can actually consider the potential impacts of the pandemic on the economies and work to mitigate the negative effects of on our continent's ability to invest in climate smart sectors. For example, we can take measures such as debt relief and financial support for small and medium-sized businesses, such as tax breaks or grants, or even encourage private-public partnerships to leverage on the strengths of both sectors and to pool resources to finance climate smart projects and initiatives. So overall, it's important for Africa to take a holistic approach. We need to look at opportunities to align efforts and to prioritize investments that have dual benefits in order to balance resources for combating COVID-19 and investing in climate smart sectors. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dorcas. We're going to move on to the next question. to our speaker, Niasha Fidelis. The question is the following. We should always put personal effort into the consideration of a larger background for climate smart development. What kind of efforts are being made by the African continent and African countries' governments right now? How should we interpret the opportunities in these policies and programs? Niasha, the floor is yours.
Yeah, thank you. So yeah, I had highlighted this before in anticipation of this question, and I'll go back again to the issue of because I'll talk mostly of things that I'm working on, which is the voluntary carbon markets in Africa. So to mention one of the ways that the African continent has moved forward in terms of policy to try and help, adaptation and mitigation in the continent is by inaugurating this African Carbon Markets Initiative at COP27, with a long-term ambition of, having the continent to develop carbon credits that can be put on the market to drive finance into different sectors within developing countries. As we know, like as the global South, we have, the natural resources as one of the things that we can use to be upfront in this market and be able to, implement activities that protect, our biodiversity, that improve water supply, has been mentioned before, activities that improve, the nutrition in our food, and at the same time, with those activities, be able to reduce our carbon footprint as a continent. So this initiative drives finance into different sectors in Africa, and especially agriculture and forestry, whereby we can develop, carbon projects that can generate credits that can be put on the market, and having farmers at the bottom of the chain benefit from the activities they are implementing on the ground to be able to make their farming activities more resilient, and also at the same time be able to gain more from the business by selling also a separate product at the end of the year, which is the carbon credit that could be, a very valuable asset to each and every farmer in Africa. So I think, being able to help African farmers in general and the general population understand the implications of such policies and, how they can be able to make themselves ready and prepared to take advantage of such financing when it comes. And I think it's very important to, to mention again what was mentioned before by the previous speakers, that the climate change education becomes very important, because if people don't understand how the mechanisms of such markets work, and if the farmers don't see a benefit in changing practices and implementing, practices that make them more resilient and, sequester carbon in their soils, and at the same time be able to be more profitable. So I think educating these farmers and, generating programs and developing programs that educate the people and make them understand the bottom line of implementing these different activities that drive, mitigation, adaptation, and resilience. So yeah, in short, I don't think if we are able to drive that education, implementation of the different activities would be difficult. So I think that climate change education becomes, something that's very important for us to look into and be able to address that, especially for the rural smallholder farmers that are, implementing activities and expected to benefit from the implementation of the activities directly.
Thank you, Niasha. We're going to go to our speaker, Anusha Seachern. The question is, a recent survey shows that African citizens who have heard of climate change see it as urgent. How should we make more citizens receive the information of climate change and let everyone familiar with this topic? The floor is yours.
Okay, thank you very much. So climate education is central to the development of the African continent. And I believe it must start at the very basic level of learning, be it at home and at school. Climate education must be inculcated in home as values and also among children since their very young age, so that then when they grow up, they have the mindset already imprinted with adaptation, building resilience, sustainable development. And then when they grow up, they can in turn transfer the knowledge to the future generations. For example, here in Mauritius, we are having cyclonic weather. And during the past few years, we've been experiencing torrential rainfall and unprecedented floods, which caused death of many people. So it was an alarming situation and showed the small island developing state that we are, how vulnerable we are at the climate risk. And to mention, Mauritius is positioned at the 16th most vulnerable country to climate change events. Therefore, being able to learn about climate change and understand what climate change means is something everyone should learn in the African continent, because the African continent in itself is the most vulnerable continent to climate change. So if we talk about school, climate studies must form part of school curriculum at all levels. At primary school, it can be encouraged among kids as a basic, playful, creative activities, such as children get to play with soil, grow a crop in the school backyard garden. And children should have the feel of nature since a very young age in order for them to appreciate it and have the innate need to protect, preserve, and conserve our natural resources for the survival of all living things on this planet. Moreover, at a secondary school, climate studies must be a main subject and also integrated with other subjects to enable students to understand the multi-sectoral impact of climate change. And then when we move to tertiary level, it would be of great benefit to have scholarships for African citizens to pursue BSc, MSc, or PhDs specialized in the transdisciplinary nature of climate change across all the sectors. And then when we come to home and the society, families should be educated about climate change through awareness raising by the newspaper, the TV channels, and also as per social media. Governments who work on climate change issues should make their publications be available to all persons to be able to learn about the process that is going on for climate adaptation and resilience building in the African continent. In this way, the population will be more empowered and also will have less fear of climate impacts, as they know things are moving forward in the right direction. Also, families and societies must understand the effect of climate change on different sectors and how it affects our access, availability, and affordability of our basic needs, such as food, water, shelter, energy, infrastructure, and livelihood as a whole. Such education and awareness raising will facilitate and guide behavioral change at community and societal level for adaptation, reducing vulnerability, and improving resilience. And also NGOs, civic society organizations, public and private bodies also have a role to play in climate information. So a broad range of activities on climate change can be implemented. Organizations of such webinars like this one, talks, interactive sessions, workshops, and conference are very good methods to promote climate change knowledge and climate change education. And it also gives a platform for people to express their views, their comments, their needs, and their voices about the field of climate change and the impact of climate change, and also led to solutions. And in Mauritius, we organized a climate march once, and it was very important because it regrouped all people of old age and across all the age group, and everyone joined hand in hand for the climate march. And the public were very much interested, and therefore they were able to learn more about climate change and get more involved. Advocacy campaigns and through multimedia should be done by both addressing policymakers and the general public. And when we come to policy level, dissemination of local, national, regional, and international policies with respect to climate change and protection of human rights must be disseminated to all public. And policy brief, tools, and training materials should be made available. And public should be involved in the consultation around climate change policy, because it is very important to understand each and everyone's position on climate change, and the needs must be heard in order to prepare good solution for adaptation and resilience building. Furthermore, the involvement of youth, women, old age person, disabled person, and indigenous communities in climate education and policy making is primordial, because their voices need to be heard to cater for climate resiliency and adaptation. And furthermore, we should have proper structures for climate change actions, such as a Climate Change Youth Council, Climate Women Council, and so that we can beneficiate from climate finance and have proper record, monitoring, and evaluation reporting for the system to be workable. And every action we take for climate change should be inclusive of everyone of all gender and age. Climate education must be inculcated in the mindset through education and cultivated over the years to be passed down to other generations. Actions on ground are important alongside implementation of strong policies and laws in order to guide and enforce best practices for adaptation, building resilience, and reducing vulnerability of the African continent to climate change. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Anusha, for your lovely intervention. We hope the weather gets better in Mauritius. Until then, stay safe. Moving on to our next speaker. Adel, the next question is for you. One very important issue that many African countries struggle with is the question of waste management. In Africa in general, the waste management industry is both fragmented and challenging to regulate, creating a landscape where the population and businesses are exposed to environmental harm and climate disruption. You are passionate about biotechnology entrepreneurship, sustainability, climate change, and waste management. As such, how can we capacitate African entrepreneurs to build sustainable and resilient businesses in a way that alleviates impact on climate change? Khalid?
Yes, I am with you.
Yes, the floor is yours.
Okay. First of all, we have to think like entrepreneurs. Entrepreneurs thinking about the challenge we have faced and struggle with in Africa. First of all, we have more than 118 million persons will be threatened by the climate change impacts, droughts, floods, and so on. So we have to be ready for that. Africa are accounting for more than 2 billion of waste. When it comes to the municipal solid waste only, we have produced more than 2 billion tons of waste annually. It's a huge number, contain many opportunities and challenges. Not only the pollution, the waste are due, but also the benefit should come from these waste. First of all, we have to differentiate between many type of wastes. like, for example, the agriculture waste. When it comes to using these valuable and agriculture waste in producing a compost, it will reduce the amount of greenhouse gases and increase the soil fertility and the plant productivity. When it comes to the extraction of valuable materials like some drugs and medicines, polysaccharides, proteins, and so on from these plant residues, it will increase the benefit from these plant residues and will benefit all of the stakeholders and key players in our continent. Secondly, when it comes to the municipal solid waste, like plastic, we have more than 8 million tons of plastic waste enter the oceans each year. Dealing with this amount of waste, we have many and a lot of different solutions and alternative for these plastic, like producing bioplastic materials from waste, like producing these what's called BLA, potato polylactic acid. It comes from the waste of potato, for example, and so on. We have to find many alternatives for plastic, and which is around us. In Egypt, for example, we have to produce what's called chitosan. These valuable material polysaccharide come from the shrimp shells. We have accumulation, and in Egypt only we have about 200,000 of shrimp shells produced annually. So it's a huge quantity of shrimp shells are thrown away in lakes and on the Nile River and so on. So we have to recycle these valuable materials in producing such a product will be used in many applications related to drug delivery, related to making fertilizers and pesticide. And it's one example what you will make from just dealing with one type of waste. So the number nowadays are talking about 4% only of recycling of the total waste produced by Africa. So for each entrepreneur, it's a huge opportunity to tackle many challenges related to medical waste management, agriculture waste management, dealing with plastic, paper, glass, and we have many and alternatives, successful stories available online, and many United Nations organizations are ready to invest and work in our continent, dealing with different types of these waste. I just want to mention the importance of producing such as biogas and biodiesel or biomaterials from wastes. For instance, we have an energy scarcity in many of the African countries. When it comes to these, we have a large amount of animal production in many areas like Somal and Sudan, and many countries has a representative numbers related to the animal production. Why we don't use these animal waste and animal manures in producing such a biogas? We will have two benefits from such a project. We will have the gas, and methane gas will be used in the lighting systems and in cooking, and the other product will be the fertilizer that comes after the anaerobic fermentation of these animal manures. So to conclude on these a little bit, such small snapshots and bullets, I have to mention that we have a huge amount of waste related to the municipal solid waste, and we have a huge amount of waste related to the agriculture waste. We have to deal with these opportunities. working on the adaptation and mitigation strategies related to use what scientists call the circular economy, and working on alternative solutions from the beginning to reduce the amount of fossil fuels and the virgin plastic produced. Thank you for this opportunity.
Thank you, Khaled. Our next question is to our speaker, Nomfundo Zondi. The question is on the screen. African agriculture is highly vulnerable to climate change impact, and half of the African workforce are in the agriculture sector. As an entrepreneur yourself who promotes agripreneurship and development for land and food systems, what are some key factors which would make African agriculture climate resilient, and how could the youth contribute to it? Numfundu, I hope you can fix the audio situation, or do you need some time? There is some buzzing in the mic.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, much better.
Let me just start by introducing my businesses so that maybe we can get an understanding of how business goes in South Africa, especially now. I think maybe it can reflect also in the African continent. I produce Tingo skin and Tingo tea. I rely on the climate, I rely on agriculture, I rely on agri-food waste and food, and I rely on the biodiversity around my area to produce whatever that is that I need to produce in these businesses. In the tea, we go out and we find different herbs to make our teas. And this is not particularly new in my generation, or rather in my DNA. You know, I come from my forefathers were also in the business of agriculture and the business of farming as well. So they had livestock, and in the livestock they were able to produce something in the value chain. So they made a staple food called amasi in South Africa, and they also made they were also into leather. So they were able to produce leather goods and also just to trade leather with other countries like Germany. So they would find a German man and they would sell him leather. Where I'm trying to get into in this is that they relied, and I still do, I rely closely to the climate in order to for my produces or for my goods to be, you know, distributed. So I rely on the climate to be resilient in order for me to be productive. And I have realized that what we really look into is how we interpret the climate in South Africa and also in Africa. I think, and it goes to the first point, how we interpret the climate language, the climate language. It's going to be very important how we interpret the climate language in terms of how we can produce and be productive in agriculture, making us resilient and sustainable. When you look at our calendar, the African calendar, it says that we are able to be productive, or we are much more productive in September. And that means that our climate, or rather our calendar, starts in September, the 23rd of September. And in Zulu, it means that it is the time of Umvuseleli, the god. There was a god in my hometown called Umvuseleli, the green god. The god made the area to be much more greener, to be much more productive, to be much more producing of whatever that you are able to produce in whatever farming that you are able to get into. So when you get into the month of September going on to December and January, you are much more productive by allowing you, the climate is allowing you to be productive, and even the agriculture and what grows is much more productive. And then you get into months like December in Zulu, which we call Uzibandlela. It means that there is so much grass that you cannot even go to the next, you cannot even travel to the next. And we ought to respect that in order for us to understand where we are. Know as an entrepreneur that I'm only able to be much more productive starting from September to March. March comes for then comes into the dry, praying to the gods that I pray that when September comes, I'm much more productive. And so this is my first and most important point in this discussion, that when we as Africans are able to interpret our climate in terms of what is happening and what we are living here, and not only what we are able to read on paper, then maybe we get to understand the solutions, and maybe we can get to devise ourselves the solutions going forward. My second point in terms of how we can become resilient, especially as agripreneurs or entrepreneurs in agriculture, is diving into the digital smart agriculture. I have had a lot of meetings with other people who are able, innovative in terms of digital smart agriculture, and they've shown me that we are able to, even by devising applications or apps in modern technology, we are able to see or devise applications that are going to be able to tell us where are we most productive and where are we not most productive in your own farm. These apps are going to tell us which areas are going to produce much more water and which areas are not, who do not need much more water. So I think there is a lot of opportunity in digital smart agriculture. The third point in terms of resilience and creating the resilience in entrepreneurship is understanding our own local food systems or agricultural markets. South Africa has a problem, which is the power cuts and what we call load shedding now. And load shedding now has pushed us to a point where we are now trying to find alternatives in terms of our food systems. We understand that retail are giving us, there's a lot of food, there's a lot of food, pricing is going up, what I'm trying to say. So it has pushed us to an alternative, which is where our markets, our own local markets, how are we able to create these markets? And I was telling a friend the other day that this is a shame, where it is only this point, or it's only this, it's only now that we are able to think of the alternative other than the retail when it comes to our food system. So I think we are pushed to a point where we are now going to create a solid and a fair food competition market in terms of agriculture, where the players and all the players in agriculture are going to win. And we are going, this now is pushing us to become resilient, because when we create fair food markets where the small scale farmers and the retailers are able to meet at a point where it is fair, then we are creating a much more resilient and food market. And then the next point is corruption in terms of leadership and the government and any other player in terms of in agriculture and in agribusiness. Corruption is a very huge point in my area. And I think when we are able to create a fair market that is outside of corruption, then I think we've become resilient, because the way corruption has brought us to the country to its needs, we are unable to get into the markets, to thrive in the markets. And then the last few points in terms of how we can create a fair, or rather a thriving in a climate, a thriving climate in terms of agriculture, is by biodiversity sustainability. And when we are able, like I said, all my businesses rely on biodiversity. We source out ourselves with our hands, our own biodiversity that can make what we produce in these businesses. So I think when we are able to sustain it, when we are able to sustain our own biodiversity, when it means that even the waters, the oceans, what we see now in terms of the floods in Durban, and what we see our own diversity even in the rural parts of South Africa, then we are at a point where we are going to be able to understand our own biodiversity and be able to sustain it and become resilient in a way. I think these points are quite, I think they group, or they gather what we are trying to win, or rather we are trying to achieve in terms of as agripreneurs, or rather as entrepreneurs in agribusiness. But I think what is going to be important going forward is our own lived experiences, but not really what we can only read on paper. What is going to be important is what we can get from the ground. People who are living every day with climate change and climate resilience. And I think if you can get into those points and really get into the gist of what we are actually living every day in Africa, and try to find the answers within us. You know, it is fine that Europe and the other countries are able to connect to us in terms of climate change and what's happening in the climate. But I think as Africa, the biggest challenge is to sit down with ourselves and devise the answers, the solutions, the questions from us and what we are living in Africa every day. Thank you so much for this opportunity.
Thank you for sharing, Mfundo. Please turn off your mic. Thank you. Moving on to our next question. Our next question is to our speaker, Noah Omogisha. The question is the following. Limited access to finance is a persistent problem troubling young African entrepreneurs. You are the head of Green Growth and Business Development Services, a BI Finance Limited, with the technical experience in climate smart and socially responsible green investing, SRI, and food security programs. How should we help and guide these entrepreneurs to make contributions in climate smart sectors on the continent? Noah, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Sarah. This is a good one, but I'll look at it from two angles. Access to finance has issues both on the demand side, which is the side of the entrepreneurs, but also from the finance side, which is the side for financiers, whether it is commercial banks or microfinance institutions or institutions, development finance institutions, which are offering grants or even blended finance. So I'll start from the side of the entrepreneur. Usually, like you realize that we have a lot of financing in the market, which is not, whose uptake is low. If you look like at, for example, green financing, which is basically the financing that goes into financing climate smart investments, most of it, its demand is low. And the reason is you'll find that, the requirements for accessing it are for businesses that are mature, which the young African entrepreneur may not match. For example, if I say, bring business plans, bring audited accounts, bring tax identification numbers, bring annual reports, you find in a continent where, for example, literacy levels are still low, then getting people to apply for that, clients to apply for that kind of financing becomes a challenge because they've not yet got to that level of strengthening their internal controls to be able to have those requirements. You find that they are still weak on governance. They are still weak on even developing their business model. So there is that challenge, and therefore to help the demand side get ready for and be able to access this financing, you need to have capacity building that goes in to support them do that. And this can be done by everyone in the ecosystem, in the knowledge management ecosystem. It could be the development partners, it could be government, it could be the peers, it could be all these other platforms. So we need to be able to guide them to have those in place. The other aspect is also we need to guide them on getting to appreciate what climate smart investments are. In our case, for example, at ABI Finance, we had to undertake an activity of developing the green agribusiness taxonomy, which is basically a classification or a rule book for classifying green investments or climate smart investments, and also therefore helping the users appreciate what is not climate smart or what is not green. So in that way, if, for example, like we've been saying in the previous session, if I'm going to buy seed for my farm, then I'll know I'll need to buy seed which is adapted against climate change. It is either are maturing. It is either resistant to drought, it is either resistant to pests and diseases, or it is resistant to too much waterlogging. So we must be able to help them appreciate that. If someone is setting up a farm, we must tell them that since the rainfall patterns are changing, since the rainfall patterns are changing, then there is need to have an irrigation system on the farm to help continue the production of water. You provide water for your crops and livestock in case the rains are not enough. So that is on the demand side. There's need for capacity building, both on conventional knowledge, internal controls of the businesses, business plans, record keeping and the rest, but there's also need for capacity building in terms of appreciating what is climate smart in terms of these investments they want to put their money in, and what is not climate smart. That's a bit on the demand side. On the supply side, there's quite a lot that needs to be done to enable those who are offering the financing to structure it appropriately. For example, most of the climate or green finance that is coming to Africa is geared towards mitigation. So you'll find a lot of promotions that have been done for solar. You'll find a lot of promotions that have been done for other investments that mainly are for cutting down emissions, but not so much investment has been made rather not so much financing has been availed for climate adaptation. Of course, there is a bit of advantage in that some adaptation technologies also have mitigation benefits, but again, there's a need for very deliberate structuring of the financing instruments to be able to offer that. The other aspect is that some sectors where I want to put where the youth entrepreneurs are doing business are risky. So if it is agriculture, and most of it in Africa is rain-fed, then you have a situation where there are either higher premiums for loans if you're going to access a loan to invest, or some institutions, financial institutions, for example, just do not go there for fear of losing their money. Therefore, to help youth entrepreneurs in that respect, we must, for example, put in place de-risking mechanisms, loan guarantees, lower the premiums for insurance, so that then financial institutions can be able to reduce, or rather increase their appetite to lend to the sector. So for example, on our side at ABI Finance, we have a loan guarantee product, but we have increased our risk share from 50-50 to 70-30 for those investments that are climate smart or that are green. So that is one area where you have to come in and risk these investments. The other aspect is you must build capacity of those who are offering financial services to be able to have products which match what the youth entrepreneurs are doing. You'll find that most staff of financial institutions are not environmentalists or are not natural scientists. They are graduates of commerce, graduates of business administration, economics, finance, and others. So the challenge is when they are assessing, for example, an enterprise, or when they are offering a loan, they may not be able to pick the climate smart aspects or the green aspects of that investment. So financial institutions and their staff, therefore, need capacity building dedicated to them so that they can start to have the green loan products, green loan guarantees, and also there is a need for the public awareness campaigns. We have a situation where, for example, some of this financing is available, but the youth do not know that this financing is available. So there has to be actors who take this role. the communication and advocacy role to bring together the financing side to meet with the demand side, which is the entrepreneurs who want this money to invest. The other aspect also is that from the financial services side, from my experience, you find that most of the promotions for financial institutions which have green loans or climate loans or climate finance only do promotions to promote, to talk about, to encourage people to take up these loans, for example, without necessarily highlighting why these people need to take up the loan. So you find a financial institution is advertising and saying, come, we have cheap loans for solar, we have cheap loans for irrigation, we have cheap loans for seed, but they are not actually telling you that you need this improved seed to help you beat the challenges of climate, to make your business enterprise more resilient, to guarantee yields. So there is also need on the side of the financial services providers to not only talk about encourage people to come for financing, but also give the justification and the efficacy around that kind of financing, so that there is balance between those who are offering the financing, but also those who are receiving the financing. I conclude this by saying one product or one instrument has not proven to be very effective in enabling entrepreneurs to invest in climate smart investments. So for those who are really in the space of enabling access to finance, we must deploy a blended financing model where, for example, you combine the green financing, green loans, which is basically the liquidity bit, blend it with the de-risking mechanism, which can be insurance or a guarantee scheme, and also capacity building or technical assistance on both the financial institution side or the financial side and the entrepreneur who's borrowing or who's accessing this financing. So, because that helps to address the challenge of liquidity, but also address the challenge of knowledge on how to deploy the financing or the liquidity in a way that is sustainable for both the financer, but also for the entrepreneur as well. Yes, back to you, Sarah. Thank you for listening. Yeah.
Thank you, Noah. Moving on to our speaker, Isaac Diamoaki. The question is, technology is crucial for climate smart development, and currently African technology is not at a very advanced level by global standards. Under such circumstances, and as a business analyst, social entrepreneur, conservationalist with expertise in circular economy, how should African people make technology innovation in climate smart sectors, and what could be learned from climate smart developed countries? The floor is yours, Isaac.
Thank you so much once again. I'll go straight how Africans can develop technology even from within. We have always seen technology coming from the global north to the global south for us to consume, but we surely have the potential of developing our own technology, and this is how. We need adequate capacity building in research, and the research I'm talking about here, it has to be problem-centered research to the local context in Africa. So if we look at major challenges that we face, we can actually solve them locally using our own keys. But how do we get to know that? Of course, that's where research comes into play. Then leveraging on already existing technologies, especially the digital-based technologies, internet and other DC, it could be something that we can benchmark from and we develop our own technology. Because at the moment with internet, we can get so much information, we can get so much exposure, but how do we leverage on that and come up with our own technology to solve our own local challenges that we face at hand? And then leveraging on the natural resources that we have. Take an example, in Uganda, we have abundance of sunshine available throughout the year. But surprisingly, we lose over 30% of crop produce because of inefficiency in drying or faster drying. So how do we harness this? Youth entrepreneurs can look at making simple solar dryers that are really low cost, that are really adaptable, that are really easy to make. And at the end of the day, this can be decentralized to smallholder farmers down in our communities so that they can dry their crop produce faster, efficiently, have a longer shelf life, and at the end of the day, they even get much more net profit from such kind of from their crop produce. An example is myself. I've done this and tested it. It's really working, and people are appreciating. Then leveraging on informal sector for wider technology adoption is something that Africans can also focus on. We have so much informal sector working in various economic segments, and this is where people can also leverage on having technologies that have been built in this direction. So when you look at the Ugandan context, so much work is done by informal sector, but you find informal sector has a lot of knowledge that is really not well consolidated, and if done so, a lot of things would come out, a lot of technology would be developed. So it is kind of something that Africa can look at. Then effective documentation of the technologies that people can make, or of anything that can be made to support to win support of the policies, wider adoption, and even funding. My colleague, small scale entrepreneurs, African youth entrepreneurs can't easily tap into their businesses simply because they don't have enough, they are not well prepared. Implementation of the technology, small technologies that are made is done. They can easily be implemented at a higher scale and promote a wider adoption. Going on to the other segment of the question, like what can we learn from the developed climate smart countries? It is as good as this. Africans have some kind of mindset that we are so much conditioned to be consumers rather than. So if we could learn from these other countries how they do their things, where everyone wants to put a solution on table, where everyone is thinking continuously to see that things change, or to see that transformation is achieved, then if we could look into it, then it could be something which does in fine-tuning the mindsets of people. That's why they could come into handy and cause a bigger transformation. And then looking, when we fix the mindset, then I think everything, that's the mindset of the people, or people who have developed in a climate smart way. That's how they have adopted, or that's how they have solved. Thank you so much. Those are my submissions.
Thank you, Isaac, for your lovely intervention. Thank you to all of our speakers. We're going to be moving on to questions from the audience. We received a question from Modester Firi. I hope I'm pronouncing your name correctly. If you would like to step up and ask your question, and maybe one of our speakers would be kind to answer. Are you with us, Modester? Modester, can you unmute and ask your question?
Well, my question relates to...
Please introduce yourself and where you're from, and share with us your question.
All right. Hello, everyone. My name is Modesta Piri, and I'm from Malawi. So here is my question. It relates to health and sanitation. So we all know that health and sanitation is the integral part of climate change. So statistically, most African markets are untidy. If you walk around in most African markets, you will see waste all over, things like those. And we all know that those neglected waste collected from our cities end up in our lakes and rivers. So what protocols have we put in place to incorporate sanitation as part and parcel of our everyday fight against climate change? That's my question. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Modester. Our panel of speakers who would like to take on this question.
I think I can go first.
Yes, Isaac, go ahead, please.
Yep. It is true that most markets, or not only markets, but even households, there is really no solid waste management plan for those particular entities, and it becomes even more complex to address the problem, given the mindset of people who are in those settings. So the protocols for solving such a problem would a kind of holistic approach, where different entities in the waste supply chain are engaged. So if you look at the market has its management, but to what extent has the management promoted sorting of waste before it can even be transported to a landfill, or before it can be collected by a waste recycling company or something like that? So you find there is a lot of disorganization in the whole ecosystem, and that makes waste management, or sorry, effective waste management on such kind of entities more problematic. I run a social enterprise that collects waste from markets for recycling into briquettes and biochar. But you tell people, please, this is what I need, but you'll find plastics in what you've requested for, and you find you even have to pay. But in a more organized way, we have tried to to work with informal waste pickers, who are based in the markets. Then they get the waste effectively and they sort it. And after sorting it, they say it to us. So we are only creating that kind of chain, and that is one of the protocols probably other actors can adopt. Thank you.
Thank you, Isaac. Our audience, anyone who would like to ask any question, we can take a couple more questions quickly. Anyone? There was a question in the chat earlier about food security in South Africa. Would the audience member please step up if they're still around? Now is the time for questions. No one? All right, then we shall be wrapping up. Thank you all for your interventions today, for taking the time to be here with us in this very relevant thematic. Are there any last words from our speakers? If you would like to share with us quickly, one by one.
Yeah, I can go fast.
Yes, please.
I'll just conclude by urging everyone on this call that climate change is with us and everyone has something to offer to reduce its impact. It can either be anything that you can surely influence at a personal level or even at a group level, at the so as to see that we have the problem mitigated. So I thank you so much, everyone, and I wish you all the best. Remember, it starts with everyone. It starts with me. It starts with you. Thank you.
Thank you, Isaac. Numfundo, any last words?
My last word would be just looking for ourselves to try to find. I think what's going to be important going forward is that we are able to, as Africa, to sit down with ourselves and ask the hard question, what happens around us? And I think when we are able to understand what happens around us and we understand our own time.
Fundu's voice is quite low. I'm not able to hear her well.
Can you hear me now?
Yes. Please, Numfundo, closer to your mic, and please quickly share any last comments with us.
Okay. I think what's going to be important going forward is that we are able to find our answers within ourselves, within our own sort of segment, and then within ourselves as well. Because what is going to be important going forward is that as Africa is how do we find our own solutions? Because it is fine and well to relate to the other, but it is much more something else when you are able to sit with yourself, look around what happens to you and around you, and then you find your own answers. I think with climate and how we become resilient is by first understanding Africa and what happens in Africa today. And then going forward, then you are able to understand and relate to the world. My biggest message with us today is that we are able to sit with ourselves and find the answers, the climate answers within us and what happens around us. Thank you so much for this opportunity.
Thank you so much for being here. Noah?
Thank you, Sarah. and everyone. Thank you who has been on the call and managed to make time for today. For me, my parting shot is really that since we know that climate change is here with us, but we also know that the climate change problem is not to a big extent caused by what is being done on the African continent, but also know that we are very vulnerable. We need to immediately increase our efforts to do climate smart investing. Most of us who especially are not very affected still think we have time, but we know that being able to make a mark on reversing the effects of climate change takes years, decades. So we need to start to act now. The other issue I would like to mention is that for everything we think about, we should also ask ourselves, where is the money going to come from? Every action requires money, even if it is an advert on radio, even if it is improved seed, even if it is solar, it requires money. We need to start to ask ourselves, where is this financing going to come from? Which partnerships must we get into, therefore, to enable us access this financing, which we can then push down to be able to help the last person in the value chain or in the ecosystem, so that we can be able to invest in these environmentally and socially responsible investments. So yes, we are aware, but we must start to look for the financing. We must start to get into partnerships that are going to make us take the next step into environmentally and socially responsible investing that is going to enable us adapt or mitigate this climate change problem. Thank you all.
Thank you, Noah. Very well said. Yes, Adel, go ahead.
Many thanks, Sarah and YALDA Summit, for this opportunity to contribute. It was very, very, very great a chance to exchange experience with you and your audience. I thank you for this taking floor and taking a chance to speak with you for this time, and for take a home message. It's never too late to start. You have to start by now. You have to do your research. You have to get an opportunity in dealing with waste management and any such a fascinating program and challenges around us. Africa, it's not for diseases and climate change impacts only. It's also for making creative entrepreneurs and strong youth empowerment for many sectors around us. Thank you for this chance and have a nice day.
Thank you, Dr. Adel Khaled. Moving on to Dorcas, any last words?
Thank you very much for this opportunity. For me, my parting shot would mainly be that we need a change of perception, and especially on climate change. And this would be very crucial in driving action. By raising awareness and understanding of the issue and highlighting our personal and collective benefits of taking action, and encouraging individuals and communities to take personal responsibility and engage with the issue. It can create a sense of urgency and motivate us as a continent, from the leadership to the individual, to take action. So it is important to remember that climate change is a problem that affects all of us, and it requires our collective effort. So yeah, thanks a lot.
Thank you, Dorcas. And last but not least, Nyasha, would you like to say a few words?
Yes, sure. Maybe just in short, I just wanted to also repeat things that have been said already, that I think it's important for us as Africans to really consider climate change education and how it's facilitated all through our academic institutions from bottom up or top down. I think it's very important that everyone across the board understands what this means for both their environment, their livelihoods, and their economies. And I think if it's done, especially from even integrating this new education with regards to climate change mitigation and adaptation from a primary level, and make kids understand it also, so that, you know, decisions that are being made now going forward are conscious enough to make sure that, you know, the livelihoods for the future are preserved. And maybe as a final say, I also wanted to just thank the organizers of the meeting and the people that managed to join us on a Saturday. I think it's very important that they took time to, you know, say something to the youth and be able to, you know, be part of the drivers of change. So yeah, thank you all for attending and being part of this gathering.
Thank you, Nyasha. Thank you all for being here. Thank you, our distinguished panel of experts. Thank you, YALDA, for providing this platform. And finally, thank you to our attendees for being here this Saturday, and may you all have a good one. Bye.